All right, let's dive into the world of scaling Agile, specifically the Scaled Agile Framework, better known as SAFe. We've got tons of research and real-world case studies to dig into, so let's get started.
Yeah, and it's a timely deep dive. IT companies are realizing that they need to bring agile principles beyond small teams and kind of into the entire organization. But doing that effectively, well, that's where things get interesting.
Absolutely, and SAFe seems to be leading that charge. But is it really the answer to everything? I mean, is it all it's cracked up to be? I guess we'll find out. We'll get insights from developers, Scrum Masters, even managers who have actually implemented SAFe.
Yeah, those firsthand perspectives are going to be great. We'll
Okay.
unpack the benefits. I'm really interested in how SAFe tackles transparency and predictability,
Right.
but on a larger scale. We'll also look at the criticisms, of course, so you can get a balanced view of the whole thing.
Now, before we get into all of that, I have to ask, why is scaling Agile even necessary? I mean, wasn't Agile originally for small, nimble teams?
Right, exactly. Traditional agile methodologies, like Scrum, those were built for speed and flexibility at a team level. But when larger companies see those teams succeeding and
Right.
delivering value quickly and adapting to change, well, they want to do that too. They want to copy that success
Yeah.
and spread it across their entire organization. But classic agile,
Yeah.
it wasn't really made for massive projects with hundreds of developers and all these complicated dependencies. It's like trying to run a marathon with a team of sprinters. You need a different approach.
So scaling frameworks like SAFe are trying to close that gap, bring Agile to the enterprise level.
Exactly, and SAFe has really taken off. By 2022, research showed over half of companies using a scaling framework chose SAFe. So
Yeah.
it's become a major force in the industry.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Okay.
Okay, so let's break down SAFe. How does this actually work? I'm a visual learner, so paint me a picture.
All right, so let's visualize this. The most basic version of SAFe, they call it Essential SAFe, has two main levels. At the bottom, you have the team level, which is pretty much like traditional Scrum, self-organizing teams working in sprints. But above that is the program level, where multiple teams are grouped together into what SAFe calls an Agile Release Train.
An Agile Release Train. That sounds pretty intense.
It is about coordination and alignment. Imagine all those teams working together, like cars on a train, all moving towards the same destination, delivering value to the customer. They plan releases together, they develop together, and they release software continuously.
So everyone's working together,
Yeah.
moving in the same direction. But how does SAFe actually keep all of those teams on track?
Well, that's where some of SAFe's key features come in. One of the most important is PI planning, which stands for Program Increment Planning.
Okay, so what exactly happens during PI planning?
Picture this. It's this huge collaborative event. It usually lasts 2 days, where all the teams on the Agile Release Train come together and they plan the next program increment, which is usually like an 8 to 12 week period. They figure out the features, they find any dependencies, and they basically commit to a shared plan. It's kind of like a supercharged sprint planning session.
Yeah.
But on a much larger scale.
I see. It sounds pretty powerful, getting everyone on the same page
Yeah.
right from the start. But does all that upfront planning, does that go against the Agile principle of embracing change?
That's a really good question. And actually, it is one of the criticisms we'll talk about later. Some people argue that SAFe focuses so much on planning ahead that it makes it harder to adapt to change compared to, more traditional Agile methods.
Interesting. So while PI planning might give structure and alignment, it also brings up questions about flexibility.
Exactly. It's a trade-off. And one of the things organizations need to seriously think about when they're implementing SAFe. But for now, let's stick with how it all works. Another important part of SAFe is the Agile Release Train itself. This isn't just a metaphor. It's a real structure with specific roles and responsibilities.
Okay, so walk me through those roles. Who's driving this train?
Okay, so you have your release train engineer, kind of like a Scrum Master, but they work at the program level, making sure the whole train runs smoothly. Then there's the product manager. They're responsible for the big picture vision and the roadmap. And then, of course, you have the individual Agile teams, each with their own Scrum Master and product owner, working on different parts of the overall program increment.
Wow. It's really interesting how SAFe takes familiar Agile roles and then scales them up to work at the enterprise level. But does it actually work? Does it deliver? What are some of the main benefits that companies report after implementing SAFe?
Well, let's start with one of the biggest selling points: transparency. SAFe is designed to make everything visible across the entire organization. Think of giant roadmaps showing progress for every team, and regular meetings to share knowledge, and constant communication with customers about what's coming next. It's like you're shining a light on the entire development process.
That sounds great, but does it actually work that way in practice? I mean, transparency is great in theory, but it can be really hard to achieve in a large and complex organization.
Well, our research suggests that it can. For example, there's this case study from a Finnish IT company that used SAFe, and they said one of the biggest improvements was the ability to track work much more clearly. SAFe helped them reduce what they call invisible tasks, those sneaky little tasks that always seem to slip through the cracks and cause delays.
Oh yeah, I know those invisible tasks. They can be real budget and schedule killers. So SAFe helps make those visible.
Exactly. By creating the structure for visualizing and tracking work at every level. SAFe keeps those tasks from falling through the cracks. It's all about creating a shared understanding and making everyone accountable.
Got it. So more transparency, less chaos. Sounds good to me. What else? What are some other benefits?
Another major benefit is predictability. SAFe structure and planning methods help companies estimate timelines more accurately, plan for dependencies between teams, and keep everyone in the loop, including the customer, about how things are progressing. No more last-minute surprises or scrambling to meet deadlines.
No, that's something I think everybody wants.
Yeah.
But wouldn't all that planning and structure make things less agile? Wouldn't it stifle creativity and innovation?
That's a very common concern, and one that we'll definitely discuss more when we talk about the criticisms of SAFe. But it's important to note that predictability and agility aren't necessarily opposites. In fact, some people would argue that SAFe's structure actually allows for more agility, especially in complex projects with multiple teams.
Okay, so how does that work? I'm curious to hear that perspective.
Imagine you're a developer on a large project. With SAFe, you still have the flexibility and freedom to work within your team's sprint, but you also have the context and alignment that comes from the larger program increment and the Agile Release Train. So it's like you have the best of both worlds, the freedom to be creative and agile at the team level, combined with the structure and predictability of a clear roadmap.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. It's like having a set destination in mind, but allowing for detours and changes along the way.
Exactly. And that's a crucial part of how SAFe approaches agility, providing enough structure to ensure alignment and predictability, but without stifling innovation and responsiveness. It's a balancing act.
I'm starting to see how this all works. SAFe seems to be about finding that balance between agility and structure at scale. But I'm sure it's not always perfect. There must be some downsides, right?
You're right. No framework is perfect. One criticism is that SAFe can actually make prioritization harder, not easier.
Wait, hold on. You said prioritization was a benefit. How can it be both?
It really depends on the situation. It all comes down to flexibility. SAFe has those strict planning cycles, remember, so if everything is locked in place months in advance, it's tough to change things, like if there's an urgent request or the market suddenly shifts.
So it's almost like SAFe is going back to that old waterfall approach, where everything is set in stone, even though the world is changing so fast these days.
Yeah, that's exactly what some critics say. They say SAFe sacrifices too much agility for the sake of structure. In fact, Agile expert Jeff Gauhelf, he even says that SAFe is not agile because it focuses too much on processes and ceremonies.
Okay, I see what you mean. So you're trading responsiveness for predictability. Makes you wonder if there are times when a company needs to change direction quickly, and SAFe just isn't built for that.
Exactly. It really shows how important context is. SAFe might work well for organizations with pretty stable product roadmaps, but it could be a nightmare for companies in rapidly changing markets.
Right, it's a trade-off that companies really need to think about. But don't you need some level of planning? Especially with those big, complex projects. I mean, how else are you going to coordinate hundreds of developers?
Absolutely. Planning is super important. But some people say that SAFe goes too far. They argue that all the ceremonies, roles, and documentation can create a lot of bureaucracy, especially for teams that are used to leaner, more self-managing ways of working.
Yeah, that makes sense. Developers want to build things, not fill out forms all day. Did the case studies you looked at mention this at all?
They did. The Finnish company we talked about before, they said that some of their teams found the PI planning process, which can take days to finish. They found it to be really burdensome and time-consuming. Some people felt like it was taking time away from actual development work.
Days of planning. Oh, man. I'm getting a headache just thinking about it. No wonder some people are hesitant about SAFe. Seems like it could create just as many problems as it solves.
Yeah, it all comes back to finding the right fit. SAFe can be a powerful tool, but like any tool, it can be misused or used in the wrong situation.
That makes sense. Speaking of context,
Yeah.
what about the customer's perspective? We've talked about how SAFe affects development teams, but how does it change the way companies interact with their customers?
That's a really important point. SAFe can definitely create challenges when it comes to managing stakeholders, both inside and outside the organization.
Okay, so what kind of challenges are we talking about?
Well, one problem is that customers who aren't familiar with SAFe, they might have trouble understanding how it works, which can lead to mismatched expectations and friction. It requires a big change in mindset from both the development team and the customer.
So companies don't just need to implement SAFe internally, they also need to educate their customers about the framework and how it changes the way they work together.
Absolutely. Clear communication and setting expectations are really crucial. But even with good communication, SAFe structure can sometimes create a disconnect between the customer and the development team.
That's interesting. I thought one of SAFe's goals was to improve communication and collaboration.
It is, but the research shows that it doesn't always work out that way, actually. Here's a quote from a developer who works in a SAFe environment. It really illustrates this challenge. They said, "The company is not on an equal level with many other stakeholders, and when there are major changes, the company is often not involved with the specifications until they are nearly finalized. SAFe does not offer tools to improve cooperation in such situations."
Wow, that's a little worrying. It sounds like SAFe can sometimes create this kind of us versus them feeling between the development team and the customer.
That's a real risk, and it's something organizations need to be careful about. If SAFe is implemented in a way that isolates the development team or makes the customer feel left out, it can damage relationships and erode trust.
So it sounds like SAFe isn't a perfect solution. It's not going to magically fix all of Agile scaling problems. It seems like it has its own set of challenges and complexities.
Exactly. SAFe is a powerful framework. It has the potential to bring structure and alignment to large-scale Agile projects, but it's not one-size-fits-all. Organizations need to carefully weigh the benefits and drawbacks, and most importantly, make sure it's the right fit for their specific situation and culture.
This deep dive has been really helpful. We've looked at SAFe from all sides, we've explored the details, and we've highlighted both the good and the bad.
I think I'm starting to understand the nuances of this framework, and it's clear that there's no easy answer when it comes to scaling Agile. So where does that leave us? Is SAFe a good thing or a bad thing?
It's not really about good or bad, it's about finding the right tool for the job. SAFe can be great for getting large organizations aligned, getting everyone on the same page. And it can definitely help with making software development more predictable. But it's not a magic solution, and there are trade-offs. You really have to think about those carefully.
You keep mentioning context. What do you mean by that? What are some things that companies should consider when they're deciding whether or not to use SAFe? Sure, the size and complexity of the company is a big one. I mean, SAFe is really made for large enterprises, companies with multiple teams and lots of dependencies. It might be too much for a smaller, more agile company.
So like a small startup probably wouldn't benefit from SAFe.
Probably not. They might even find it restrictive. Company culture is another thing to consider. SAFe needs buy-in from everyone in the organization. If the culture is resistant to change, or if it's really bureaucratic, SAFe probably won't work.
I see what you mean. You can't just force a framework on a company that isn't ready for it. So what about the types of projects? Does that matter?
Yeah, for sure. SAFe is a good fit for projects that have pretty stable requirements and predictable timelines. But if a company is doing really innovative stuff, where the requirements are constantly changing, then SAFe's focus on planning ahead could actually be a problem.
Got it. It's all about matching the framework to the company's goals and the kind of work they do. It seems like SAFe can be really useful, but it's not the answer for everyone.
Exactly. Like I said before, it's about using the right tool for the job. And even if a company does decide to implement SAFe, it's important to do it carefully and adapt it to their own needs. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. We've really dug into SAFe and explored its potential, but also its limitations. For everyone listening out there, hope this has given you some things to think about.
Definitely. Think about where you work. What challenges do you face when it comes to scaling Agile? Would SAFe be a good fit for your company? Or maybe there's a different approach that would work better.
Maybe there are even just parts of SAFe that you can use. Even if you don't adopt the whole framework, the goal is to find what works best for you, for your team, and for your organization.
Absolutely. And remember, this is just the start of the conversation. There's always more to learn in the world of Agile. So keep asking questions, keep trying new things, and keep improving your approach. That's what Agile is all about.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.